Philadelphia, April 23, 1970, 2 a.m. A warehouse on Delaware Avenue, South Philly. Cold concrete floors, single overhead light, cigarette smoke filling the air. 15 men standing in a loose circle. 5 Italians on one side. Bruno family soldiers, Philadelphia mob. 10 black men on the other side. Frank Matthews' crew. In the center, Frank Matthews, 24 years old, sharp suit, completely calm. Across from him, Vincent Marinelli, 42, Bruno family soldier for 18 years, short temper, old school mentality. They're negotiating territory. Matthews wants to operate in Philadelphia. The Italians want 50% of everything Matthews makes. The meeting has been tense for an hour, and in 30 seconds, Vincent Marinelli is going to say one word that will change his life forever. This is the story of what happens when disrespect meets intelligence, when racism meets power, and when a young black man teaches an old Italian mobster a lesson he'll never forget. To understand what happened in that warehouse, you need to know who Frank Matthews was in April 1970. He'd been operating for 2 years, built distribution networks in New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, making serious money, hundreds of thousands monthly. But Philadelphia was controlled by Angelo Bruno, the gentle Don. The Bruno family ran everything: drugs, gambling, unions, construction. Nobody operated in Philly without Bruno's permission. And Bruno didn't like outsiders, especially black outsiders. Matthews knew this. But Matthews also knew Philadelphia was too valuable to ignore. Major city, massive market, direct route between New York and Baltimore. He needed Philadelphia. So he requested a meeting. Bruno sent 5 of his soldiers to represent him. Vincent Marinelli led the group. Marinelli was old-school Italian mob. Respected violence, understood loyalty, but had zero respect for black criminals. To Marinelli, the drug trade belonged to Italians. Always had. Always would. Black dealers were street level. They didn't negotiate with made men. They took orders. The meeting started professional. Bruno's men laid out terms. Matthews could operate, but 50% of profits went to the Bruno family. Protection, access, territory, all for 50%. Matthews countered, 20%. He'd pay 20% for permission to operate, but he controlled his own product, his own people, his own distribution. The Italians laughed, 40%. Matthews stayed firm, 25%, and he'd give Bruno family first refusal on any expansion into South Jersey. The negotiation went back and forth for an hour. But here's where it gets truly shocking. Vincent Marinelli was getting frustrated. He didn't like negotiating with Matthews, didn't like that Matthews was confident, articulate, dressed better than most wise guys, didn't like that Matthews wasn't backing down. To Marinelli, this was disrespectful. A black man, 24 years old, telling Italian mobsters what he would and wouldn't do? Unacceptable. Marinelli's face was getting red. His voice was getting louder. The other Bruno soldiers noticed. One of them, Tony Benedetto, tried to calm Marinelli down, whispered something. Marinelli waved him off. Matthews proposed 30%, his final offer. He'd pay 30% of Philadelphia profits to the Bruno family. Fair split. Everyone makes money. The other Bruno soldiers looked at each other. 30% was reasonable. They could accept that. But Vincent Marinelli couldn't. He was angry now, felt disrespected, felt like Matthews wasn't showing proper deference. Marinelli stood up, pointed at Matthews. Voice raised. You think you can come into our city and make demands? You think you're equal to us? Matthews stayed seated, calm. I think we can do business that benefits everyone. That's what I think. Marinelli's face twisted. That response, composed, intelligent, showing no fear, made him angrier. Because it proved Matthews wasn't intimidated, wasn't playing the role Marinelli expected. And that's when Marinelli said it. loud enough for everyone to hear. Listen, you fucking nigger. The warehouse went completely silent. The word hung in the air like poison. Matthews's 10 men reached for their weapons, hands on guns, ready to draw. The 5 Italians tensed. This was about to become a shootout. 15 armed men in a confined space. Nobody walks out. But Matthews raised his hand, stopped his men, didn't reach for his own weapon, didn't stand up, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Vincent Marinelli and smiled. Wait, don't miss this detail. Because that smile was more terrifying than any threat. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't nervous. It was a knowing smile. The smile of someone who just won. Matthews let the silence stretch. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Everyone waiting. Finally, Matthews spoke. Voice quiet, calm, almost gentle. Vince, that word just cost you everything. Marinelli didn't understand. What? You threatening me? You think? Matthews interrupted, still calm, still quiet. I'm not threatening you, Vince. I don't need to. You just did something stupid, and now everyone in this room knows it. Marinelli looked confused, angry. What are you talking about? Matthews gestured around the warehouse. There are 15 men here. 10 are mine. 5 are yours. Everyone heard what you just said, and tomorrow morning, I'm going to make a phone call. Matthews stood up slowly, adjusted his tie. I'm going to call Angelo Bruno. I'm going to tell him I tried to negotiate in good faith. I'm going to tell him I offered fair terms. And I'm going to tell him that Vincent Marinelli, representing the Bruno family, called me a racial slur in front of witnesses, threatened the deal, and risked turning this business negotiation into a racial incident that could bring federal attention, civil rights activists, and media coverage to Philadelphia organized crime. Matthews took a step toward Marinelli. And then I'm going to ask Mr. Bruno a simple question. Is that the kind of representation he wants? Is that the kind of soldier he trusts to handle sensitive negotiations? The other 4 Italian soldiers looked at each other. They understood immediately what Matthews was doing. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't about revenge. This was about business. Matthews was threatening to make Vincent Marinelli a liability to Angelo Bruno. And in the mob, liabilities get cut loose. Tony Benedetto spoke up, voice careful. Frank, let's all calm down. Vince didn't mean... Matthews cut him off. Vince meant exactly what he said. But here's what's interesting, Tony. I'm willing to forget this happened. I'm willing to continue our negotiation. I'm willing to accept the 30% offer and move forward like professionals. Matthews looked at each Bruno soldier. But Vince can't be part of this deal. He's shown he can't control himself. He's shown he puts his ego ahead of business. And I won't work with someone who can't treat me with basic respect. Matthews turned to Marinelli. So here's what's going to happen, Vince. You're going to walk out of this warehouse. You're going to tell Angelo Bruno that you lost your temper and jeopardized a profitable arrangement. And you're going to recommend that Tony here handle Philadelphia negotiations going forward. Marinelli's face was purple now. You can't tell me what to... But here's what made this moment truly devastating. Tony Benedetto interrupted. Vince, shut up. Marinelli looked at his fellow soldier in shock. Tony continued. Frank's right. You fucked up. You made this personal. And now we have a choice. Lose a deal that could make us hundreds of thousands because of your pride, or fix this and move forward. Tony looked at Matthews. Frank, give us a minute. Matthews nodded, walked to the far side of the warehouse with his men. The 5 Italian soldiers huddled together. The conversation lasted 3 minutes, voices raised, Marinelli arguing, the others shutting him down. Finally, Tony Benedetto walked over to Matthews. Vince is out. I'll handle negotiations from here. 30%? Paid monthly? Your territory stays yours. We provide protection from other families. Deal? Matthews extended his hand. They shook. Deal. Tony called out to Marinelli. Vince, you're done here. Go home. Marinelli stood there, humiliated in front of everyone. He'd walked into this warehouse as the lead negotiator. He was walking out demoted, embarrassed, and everyone knew it was his own fault. What happened next proved Matthews understood power better than men twice his age. As Marinelli walked toward the door, Matthews called out, Vince. Marinelli stopped, turned around. Matthews walked over, extended his hand. No hard feelings. Business is business. Marinelli looked at the hand, looked at Matthews. Everyone watching. If Marinelli refused the handshake, he'd look even more childish. If he accepted it, he'd be accepting his own humiliation. After 5 long seconds, Marinelli shook Matthews's hand. Didn't say anything, just turned and walked out. The door closed behind him. The remaining 14 men in that warehouse knew they'd just witnessed something rare. A young black man outplaying a made Italian mobster without violence, without threats, just with intelligence and control. The deal went forward. Matthews operated in Philadelphia, paid 30% monthly to the Bruno family, made millions over the next 3 years. Tony Benedetto became his primary contact. Professional relationship, mutual respect. But Vincent Marinelli? His reputation in Philadelphia never recovered. Word spread quickly. Marinelli lost a major deal because he couldn't control his racism. He got emotional. He got played by a 24-year-old. Other mob families heard about it. Marinelli became a joke. The guy who got embarrassed by Frank Matthews. By 1972, Angelo Bruno quietly pushed Marinelli into early retirement. No ceremony, no respect, just go away. But here's the detail that makes this story truly powerful. 3 years later, in 1973, when Frank Matthews vanished, the FBI interviewed everyone who'd done business with him. They interviewed Tony Benedetto. When agents asked about Matthews's reputation in Philadelphia, Tony said something that ended up in the FBI file. Frank Matthews was smarter than 90% of the wise guys I know. He understood something most criminals don't. Real power isn't about being the toughest. It's about making people need you more than you need them. Vince Marinelli thought power was calling someone a name. Frank showed him power was making that name cost you everything. The FBI also tried to interview Vincent Marinelli. He refused, wouldn't talk about Matthews, wouldn't answer questions. One retired agent later said, "We knew Marinelli had dealt with Matthews, but when we approached him, he got angry, refused to cooperate, and basically told us to leave." We learned later that the Matthews negotiation had ended Marinelli's mob career. He was still bitter about it years later. Matthews had gotten into his head and stayed there. This is what people don't understand about Frank Matthews. Yes, he was a drug dealer. Yes, he operated outside the law. But within the criminal world, Matthews played by rules that went beyond violence. He understood that respect earned through intelligence lasts longer than respect earned through fear. When Vincent Marinelli used that word in April 1970, he thought he was asserting dominance. What he actually did was give Matthews the leverage to dismantle his entire position. And Matthews did it without raising his voice, without threatening, without violence. Just strategy. The warehouse meeting on April 23, 1970, lasted another hour after Marinelli left. Matthews and Tony Benedetto worked out logistics, territory boundaries, payment schedules, communication protocols, professional, efficient. By 4 a.m., they were shaking hands. Matthews operated in Philadelphia for 3 years without a single conflict with the Bruno family. Not because the Italians loved him, but because Matthews had proven he was smart enough to avoid conflicts and ruthless enough to win them if necessary. Years later, researchers interviewing former mob associates found that the warehouse incident became a teaching story. Old wise guys would tell younger ones, "Remember when Vince Marinelli tried to play tough with Frank Matthews? Don't be Vince, be smart. The story survived because it illustrated a truth about organized crime in the 1970s. The power structure was changing. Black criminals weren't just street dealers anymore. They were sophisticated operators who could negotiate, strategize, and win. And the old-school mobsters who couldn't adapt, who let racism cloud their judgment, got left behind. So remember this: April 23rd, 1970, 2 a.m., South Philadelphia. Vincent Marinelli called Frank Matthews a racial slur in front of 15 armed men. Marinelli thought it would put Matthews in his place. Instead, it ended Marinelli's career and proved that the most devastating response to disrespect isn't violence. It's making your enemy destroy himself while you stay calm, stay smart, and stay in control. That's who Frank Matthews was. That's why he became a legend.